The Prince and Princess of Wales. They look every inch the model.
But it was a really intimate kind of...
The Prince and Princess of Wales. They look parents, as centuries of royals had done before him. The Prince and Princess of Wales. They look every inch the model of what a royal family... The Prince and Princess of Wales
were there because there was this fear that the baby might be swapped, that you know, a commoner might be exchanged.
The Prince and Princess of Wales. They look every inch...
It says a lot about her as a person, show that she's not afraid to...
The Prince and Princess of Wales. They look every inch the model of what a royal family should be and how they should behave.
When you see William and Kate with their children,
level of honesty. The Prince and Princess of Wales. They look every inch the model of what a royal family should be and how they should behave.
when you see William and Kate with their children, I think they've managed to look fairly traditional.
But behind the formal facade lies a couple who've done nothing less than lead a royal rebellion. Not heralded by fanfares, but brought about through quiet acts of revolution.
The Queen looked a little bit wary of George splatting everything all over the place.
What William's doing is not something that the world of Queen Elizabeth and her parents understood.
This is the untold story of a couple determined to do things differently. A story of love, resilience, and a bold departure from the expectations of the crown.
They are changing the way of royal parenting forever.
Featuring exclusive interviews with royal insiders, combined with rarely seen archive footage, we will uncover the heartbreaking struggles of the royal family's past.
For Elizabeth II, duty always came first, and that was her biggest problem so far as her children were concerned.
And reveal just how they've pushed William and Catherine to make radical changes in their own family to ensure the royal future.
William has said that the stiff upper lip generation had a lot to answer for it because it messes up your life.
They're moving the monarchy towards an even more relatable, accessible place.
So does what are this trailblazing couple doing so differently?
William and Catherine want to be public servants, but they believe that their children have the right to privacy until they're adults.
And how are they rewriting the rule book to raise the next generation of royals?
Being heir to the throne, this is what he's been fated with. But if you asked him what was the most important thing in his world, it'd be Catherine and his 3 children.
In order to stay relevant, the monarchy has to evolve. And I think that William and Catherine are the 2 people to lead that revolution.
On the 22nd of July, 2013, the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge had their first child, George Alexander Louis, a baby boy and the future heir to the British throne.
I remember that they came, it makes me very emotional, they came down the steps together. She looked sensational. I don't know any woman who's just had a baby, their first baby as well, which always seems the hardest, and that she could look so radiant. And William stood there, and the way he looked at the baby, it was just beautiful, and it was so that he was happy at last.
To all intents and purposes, it looked like a replay of history, of another summer's day, just over 30 years before. Same hospital, proud parents with their newborn, a mass of paparazzi waiting to greet them. But despite the similarities with the royal past, there were also some intriguing hints that this first-time dad had very different ideas to his father about what kind of royal parent he was going to be. And someone who witnessed William and Charles's relationship firsthand is former royal butler Grant Harold.
When you think back to the Lyra wing when You think obviously of Prince Charles and Diana, Princess of Wales, coming out, getting straight into the car, driving off. And then you've got their son, Prince William, and it's different because they immediately got up and start chatting to the crowd.
Well, he's got a good pair of lungs on him, that's for sure.
And it wasn't just William who addressed reporters.
Very emotional.
Very emotional. It's a special time. I think any parent, I think, probably sort of know what this feeling feels like. So.
Very special.
From my perspective, as someone who's kind of watched right from the beginning when Kate joined the royal family, when it came to the royal side of things, it was clear that she was at times very nervous. But I think when it's come to their home life, she's been very confident in asserting herself and what she's wanted for her family life.
Oh, we've done that already. Good.
It's quite sweet because it shows that William is very much already hands-on and wants to kind of step into that role. And I'm not saying that the king didn't change a nappy, he probably did change nappies, but the fact they actually talk about it and tell people, that's the big difference.
The more fun was that just outside when he was struggling to get the baby seat put in the car. He was very determined to do that, to show that he would drive his young family away, and I thought that was quite a statement. But he was so worried about sort of messing up that bit because, of course, you're doing all these things that most people would do in front of the world's media, and it's been beamed around, millions to millions of people.
It was very interesting that they didn't get a chauffeur to take them. That's what you would expect. But he wanted to have as normal a family as possible. This was his baby, his wife, and he was going to be the father and show everyone that's what he could do.
And as this thoroughly modern prince drove his family away, rather than rely on royal nannies to help with the challenges of being new parents, as centuries of royals had done before him, William and Catherine chose to spend the first few weeks in Berkshire with Kate's parents.
William, of course, had to return to his duties, so it was quite a good idea for her to spend some time with her mum whilst the baby was just dealing with the more difficult things in the immediate aftermath of the birth.
For them, because of who they are and what they stand for, these little things become such a powerful statement.
With a hands-on DIY style of parenting evident right from the start, William and Catherine were immediately making it clear that the way they intended to bring up the next generation of royal children would be very different from the norm. After Prince George came Princess Charlotte, and then the baby of the family, Prince Louis. And 2 years after Louis's arrival, Kate did something no other royal had done before. She made the decision to share intimate details about giving birth.
She was really open about her experiences of pregnancy and of labour, and she spoke about hypnobirthing techniques that she'd used. She spoke about the power of using breathing. She also made some quite funny comments about William, saying, "I'm not going to say that William was there chanting sweet nothings at me." And she went on to say that this was something that she wanted to do for her, which I think is something a lot of women can relate to. But it was a really intimate kind of revelation about her own personal experiences.
For a royal family who were famously private, it was an unprecedented level of honesty. But this new relatable royal approach was one that captured the public's imagination.
Kate talked about having a hypnobirth with Louis. She also talked about how difficult it was and had struggles that all new mothers go through, and that humanised her quite a lot. I think the fact that she shared that detail says a lot about her as a person, showed that she's not afraid to admit that she's not, everything in her world isn't perfect.
As well as being open about her experiences as a mum, Kate also prioritised spending time with her children rather than rushing to return to royal duty. And it wasn't just Catherine. William too made it clear that he had no intention of being a part-time royal parent.
So, William is a very hands-on parent with the day-to-day of his children's lives. It's not just being there for sort of the big moments like the first day of school. He's very much involved in the day-to-day as well, and making sure that his schedule allows for that to be possible. So for him to be able to be on the school run is important to him.
You had a good day today?
Yeah, good day.
First school day?
First school day. It's well. There's one other parents having more of an issue with their children, so I was quite pleased I wasn't the one.
Every generation of royals needs to be reflective of the generation that they're in, and I think William is very much reflective of a modern dad who will adapt his work if necessary in order to be able to be there for his children for when they need him.
But to discover where the seeds for Kate and Will's royal parenting revolution were sown, we have to go back in time, to an age when being brought up as a future monarch meant isolation behind palace walls. And for the Queen, duty to the crown was all.
I think she felt she had to live up to this extraordinary standard, even if it meant neglecting the children.
It was an obligation from the royal past which Kate and William were determined to change. Prince William and Princess Catherine have made royal parenting their way an absolute priority. But to understand just how radical their decisions are, and just why they've decided to rebel, you have to take a step back into the not-so-distant past, when things couldn't have been more different.
The traditional royal birth, I mean, the best way to sum it up is that it was completely bonkers by today's standards because, for example, when Queen Victoria was born, the Home Secretary and numerous members of the aristocracy were there because there was this fear that the baby might be swapped, that you know, a commoner might be exchanged.
I think it's safe to say that rule has now been relaxed. And luckily, Catherine, Princess of Wales, didn't have to go through that. But apparently that was the royal procedure.
And nearly 70 years before the birth of Prince George, rather than being born in a hospital, heirs to the throne were always delivered at home.
King Charles was born at Buckingham Palace, and that wasn't unusual.
Royal births have always been at home, and that is because you certainly couldn't expect a reigning monarch to go into hospital, certainly in the case of our late Queen. So the hospital came to her.
This was a world where royal protocol was followed to the letter. And rather than being taken to school by their dad, royal children barely left the confines of the palace walls.
Elizabeth II was schooled entirely at home, partly to avoid any sense that of bad influences, of Elizabeth learning things that, you know, someone from her background shouldn't learn. So royal children were kept completely away from ordinary children. And so it actually made their childhoods rather lonely.
And right from Charles's early years, it was clear that for his mother, Queen Elizabeth, being a parent definitely came second to devotion to royal duty. Whilst Charles spent his third birthday at home in London, Elizabeth and Philip were away on a month-long royal tour of Canada.
Well, for the Queen, her duty came first. She made that pledge that she would put duty before everything else, and she stuck to that all her life, to her own detriment. Because it meant that she couldn't see her children nearly as much as she wanted to.
For Elizabeth II, duty always came first, and I think that was her biggest problem so far as her children were concerned. And I think she felt she had to live up to this extraordinary standard, even if it meant neglecting the children.
And the Queen's commitment to fulfill her destiny as monarch meant, in terms of royal parenting, it often fell to Charles's nanny to step into the role.
To young Prince Charles, nanny was all important. That was the person that he really loved. That was the person that was with him all day. That was the person that dressed him and fed him and bathed him. And in the late 40s, early 50s, that was completely normal.
King Charles, his nanny was called Mabel Anderson, and I met Mabel. When I met her, she'd be in her late 70s, early 80s probably, and you could see that relationship had definitely become very much part of the two of them, because obviously this is somebody who he Well, you'd spent a lot of time with her.
After the birth of their children, Catherine and William made sure they prioritised being together as a family as much as they could. But for the first 5 years of Charles's life, the Queen and Prince Philip were away for 2 of his birthdays and 3 Christmases. And whilst today Catherine and William are openly affectionate with their children, when Elizabeth and Philip returned from long trips away, royal protocol dictated their reunion with their son was strictly formal.
Elizabeth greets the dignitaries before greeting Charles, and doesn't greet Charles necessarily particularly warmly because the cameras are there. It would have been thought inappropriate by the Queen and by the older courtiers around her that she should be like emoting in the presence of her son. So I think modern times we expect emotion to be shown, but that wasn't how Elizabeth and Philip were brought up. Which doesn't mean that they weren't warm in private, but they weren't playing to the cameras in public.
The Queen absolutely adored her family, and her family were very important to her. However, she always said that she put monarchy before everything, and the royal family just didn't show affection. So, even with their own.
And when Charles himself became a father, he too inherited his mother's iron devotion to the crown.
Duty for Charles came first. He had watched his mother, and that's what she did, and that's how he followed. He also didn't think that it was his role to be changing nappies or, giving them something to eat, because he hadn't been brought up with that for himself. And you've got nannies, so why do you need that?
I think that Charles tried very, very hard to be a good father. But by the time he had children, he had a well-established public role, and he was already a sort of workaholic. So I think he was very programmed to do his duties, and perhaps didn't adjust his life as much as he might have done to the idea that you spend lots and lots of time with your children.
But the call to serve his country first wasn't one that Charles necessarily found easy.
King Charles is a very busy individual. He's got very little time for himself, let alone anyone else. But yet, what I did witness at first hand was how good he was as a parent. And if the boys had a bad day, he was very good at doing things that would make them smile or laugh or giggle, because he loves them. So I think there was definitely a tug-of-war for him, because he's had these kids that he absolutely adores, which has probably really confused him, thinking, but I want to be able to do this for them, even though I mustn't because of duty and the crown.
And one of the important things, I think, is that it is more than anything else to serve this country and its people.
But for William as a child, his father's loyalty to the monarchy came at a price.
Charles, I don't think was an absent father, but was very busy doing his engagements, travelling, making speeches which he would write himself, staying up late into the night. So time for the children, but probably time for the children that had to kind of be put in the diary.
It's a pattern that William, as a parent now himself, is absolutely determined not to repeat. And in his first interview after becoming a father, he made it clear what for him comes first.
The first interview William gave, he's made it quite clear straight away that his priority is to be a good father and a good husband and to keep the family close together. And this is, I'm sure, a lot because he hadn't had that before.
For me, Catherine and now little George are my priorities, and Lupo. And so... I was going to ask you about Lupo. Yeah.
How's Lupo coping?
He's coping all right, actually. I mean, as a lot of people know who've got dogs and bringing a newborn back, they take a little bit of time to adapt.
Within weeks of the birth of George, he gave an interview saying that he would be a hands-on dad and that really his priority would be his family. And yes, as an heir to the throne, that is important, but I think he wanted to really lay it down as a marker. To say to everybody that, yes, you can have a glimpse of my world, but I'm not going to be giving you total access.
For the first time, Here was a future heir to the throne who was publicly rejecting the royal norm and absolutely putting family ahead of duty. And when he married Kate, someone who'd grown up a world away from the royal nurseries of Buckingham Palace, he got a glimpse of a way of being a family which couldn't be more different to his own.
By comparison with traditional royal upbringings, her family the word normal just doesn't really encapsulate it. And I know for William, this was, apparently his jaw dropped. He just couldn't believe how relaxed they all were with each other, and how warm and how cuddly and huggy they were with each other.
An unremarkable middle-class family from Berkshire was about to kickstart a royal parenting revolution.
In a way that's never happened before in the royal family, the commoner who's come in, Kate, is allowed to dictate how the royal children are brought up, because William instinctively knows she's got the tools he doesn't.
But just how far would William and Kate be able to go? In 2020, the Duchess of Cambridge made a visit to an ordinary nursery in London. She was there to talk about a personal passion she's devoted much of her royal public life to, understanding how parenting in early childhood can be key to bringing up happy children. But after she'd helped give preschoolers their breakfast, she also gave a rare extended interview in which she began to reveal fascinating details of her own experiences of motherhood.
2 years after Kate had Louis, she did something that was really quite extraordinary. She gave a very long podcast interview about parenting. And it wasn't just about her charity work connected to parenting. It was very much about her personal experiences of pregnancy, of childbirth, of bringing up her children. There were so many moments that I think so many mums and parents could really identify with. She spoke about mum guilt. It was actually unbelievable. I remember listening to it for the first time, and it was like just a feast of information because we'd never heard any of this from her firsthand before.
I had a very happy childhood. It was great fun. My parents were hugely dedicated to us. I really appreciate now as a parent how much they sacrificed for us.
And what she said was in stark contrast to William's turbulent young life.
I think the overwhelming message that came from the podcast was that Catherine had a very happy childhood. Unlike William, she wasn't from a broken home going through all that trauma of the conflict between mother and father. They were very much a unified family.
And the podcast also made it clear that the things that made her upbringing so content are key to how she now wants her own children to be brought up.
I have an amazing granny who devoted a lot of time for us, playing with us, doing arts and crafts and going to a greenhouse, doing gardening stuff and cooking with us. And I try and incorporate a lot of the experiences that she gave us at the time into the experiences that I give my children now.
She talks about her grandmother and how she taught her about gardening, and she used to cook with her, and she used to do arts and crafts with her, so she loved her granny. And she wants to replicate this with her own children.
What really struck me was just how important consciously it has been to her to instill so many aspects of her childhood and so many of those simple things that she really enjoyed as a child and just bring them into her family life.
Right from the start, Kate began to introduce changes to royal family life which reflected the memories of her own middle-class Berkshire upbringing in her children's lives. Changes that might not seem radical to us, but to a royal family were revolutionary.
Actually, one of the last things we cooked together was your pizza dough. We made pizzas.
Did you?
With your pizza dough recipe. And
did it work?
It did work.
And they enjoyed it.
They loved it.
When she and William met baking royalty Mary Berry, Kate revealed she encourages the royal children to cook.
Cooking, like so many things that the rest of us take for granted, is not seen as something that royals should do. They pay people to cook for them. But Kate's made a revolutionary change in the sense that she gets her children to cook. And she's doing this because it's what she did. It adds to the fun of being a child. You can play with dough, you can make pizzas. It means that they have that freedom. And for Kate, of course, completely normal.
There was this wonderful occasion when the Queen and Prince William and Prince George were there stirring the Christmas pudding, and they were all roaring with laughter, except the Queen. He was going round and round very fast and putting a lot of energy and enthusiasm into it.
To be honest, both the Queen and Prince Charles, in his immaculate German street suit, and the Queen looked like in a lovely outfit, looked a little bit wary of George, who was splatting everything all over the place. You actually look at her face when this is going on. She thinks, I'm getting out of here. She backs away, as does Charles. It's only William that's trying to keep him under control.
But William was happy about that he was taking part, that it didn't matter if he made a mess. This is a sign of home rather than royal, because this was a home thing within a royal atmosphere, but he doesn't have to fear that he can't drop out a few bits with a spoon. And I think you saw that was quite clear of the way they behave.
And it's not just cooking. The Middleton way of enjoying and appreciating the simple pleasures of doing things together as a family is also at the heart of William and Catherine's family life.
I think that Catherine's bringing up her own children in a mirror image of the way she was brought up. They go hiking, they go camping, they get involved with scouting, toasting marshmallows over a fire, a sort of country thing.
Kate spoke about these kind of very simple activities where you're very involved and very present. And that's clearly something that she wants to emulate with her children, that quality of relationship when you're focusing on that one task and not distracted by everything else that's going on, all the pressures.
What was fantastic is that when the Prince and Princess of Wales were married and they had their first child, they would come and they would spend time back at Highgrove. I think we were lucky enough to see them in the gardens, occasionally see them wandering around, and to just know that they have this love of nature and gardens, which has been instilled from their families. And seeing Prince George with a watering can so he could go and water some of the apple trees, it's lovely to see that, building that nature into him.
And Kate's even taught William some of the everyday joys of being an ordinary parent most of us take for granted.
A former member of staff told me that she'd heard William and Kate playing with the children, and she'd heard Kate explaining to William exactly what a piggyback was. And William then said, in a sort of slightly sad, quiet voice, my father never gave me a piggyback. Not Charles's fault at all. Charles was brought up to be very inhibited, to be an adult from age 3. And so the idea of giving a piggyback would just be, well, I'm the future king. Kings don't do that kind of horseplay. And I think William suddenly realised that there was this whole world that Kate represented that he almost didn't know about.
By introducing the ordinary into this extraordinary family, Kate was beginning to create a very different royal parenting model. A model where the children were no longer confined to the nursery and left to the care of nannies, but where the whole family does things together.
The thing that was important to Catherine as a mother was that she wanted to be with her children as much as possible. Now, she knew that when she had to do royal duties, she would have to have help. So they had a housekeeper and then they had a Spanish nanny. But I think it was very important to them to know that this is our little family. It's not run by nanny like previous royal children. Catherine, having never had a nanny herself, being brought up entirely by her parents, wanted to do that as much as she possibly could.
More than any other generation of royals, they really have pared things right back. And we talk about sort of a normal upbringing. We use that word a lot. They want to be normal. But it is relevant in this case because the way that they're living their lives is much more relatable than any generation of royals previously. And that's a choice. They could have a more extravagant life if they wanted to, but they don't. And I really feel this is coming from her desire to emulate as much as possible the very happy childhood that she had from having very hands-on parents and a much more kind of simple life than William had as a child.
Although the prince wasn't brought up in a house with no staff, he was given a glimpse of a more normal childhood through his mother.
So Diana was really the revolutionary parent, because she did things in a modern way. She dressed her children in a modern way. She did modern things with them. She took them out and about with her. I mean, she famously introduced them to another life, which was homeless people. So it's very much embedded in William. It's how his mother brought him up.
Through Diana, William was given a rare window on a world that young royal princes usually never get to see, and experienced a way of being a child in the modern world rather than living isolated in a palace surrounded by servants and nannies. It's this more informal, hands-on approach to bringing up royal children that William and Catherine are trying to replicate as parents, not just at home, but even when they're doing their royal duty abroad. And in 2016, when they embarked on a royal tour after the birth of Princess Charlotte, rather than leave their young family behind like generations of royals before, they chose to take them.
I was covering their tour to Canada in 2016, and they were taking the children with them. And this was a big moment because this was getting to see the whole family on the world stage together. And obviously their children were very small, you know, so the personal challenges of that trip as well, I think, quite significant. There was a lot to consider.
Even as they descended the steps of the plane, they'd already broken a centuries-old royal protocol.
Now, the problem you've got is for William, George and Charlotte to all travel together. It's basically your line of succession is right there. They're not supposed to travel together in case something happens. William had to get permission from his grandmother, but it was agreed to. And as far as I'm now aware, that they can now travel together, which is a big change in our protocol.
As a royal baby, William had been taken on a royal tour himself, when in 1983, Diana broke protocol and refused to leave him behind when she and Charles visited Australia. But back then, Prince Charles had real doubts over whether bringing his son was the right thing to do.
I think he felt that it wasn't appropriate to take the children. And to my mind, that would have been what had been kind of drummed into him from his parents, thinking that's not the done thing. He's been brought up in a world where duty is everything, and that's all that matters. And it was almost him to reprogram himself. But it wouldn't have been easy. I'm sure he struggled as to what was the right thing to do.
But even though William went with his parents, when they got to Australia, he spent a lot of his time alone with his nanny, whilst Charles and Diana did their public duty. 30 years later in Canada, it was very different.
There was a real sense with William and Kate that they really wanted to be as a family, to be all together, and for family to be a really important part of how they presented themselves to the world. And it was incredible to see as part of a sort of public engagement, this family dynamic.
George and Charlotte even joined their parents on official engagements when they attended a children's party for military families in British Columbia.
And they took them to a party, and you see the children's joy and delight of seeing the balloons. Children are natural. They don't put on a face. They cry or they roar with laughter or they enjoy themselves. And they were both really enjoying themselves. They couldn't believe they were so lucky to say how many balloons they could have. And they were happy about that because that's what children should do.
It was a far cry from the tours of the royal past, when Charles was left at home on his birthday, and it showed just how much royal parenting norms had changed.
And they didn't put them with their nanny. They wanted to have them with them. They wanted to just let them have fun. Catherine uses that word a lot, and it's a small word but an important value. They should have fun.
But it's not just Will and Kate's changes to become more hands-on parents alone that has made their revolution so successful. It's that they've agreed and made those changes together. Whilst Diana, and to some extent Charles, also saw themselves as hands-on parents, they interpreted that in completely different ways.
I think Charles felt as a parent, because William was going to be king, he had to give him the more formal side of it. He had to give him the traditions, the kind of seriousness that you would need to be a good king. Because there's this terror in the royal family that the next generation will be the person who ruins it all. We become a republic and they're responsible. Diana wanted to do the opposite. She wanted William to be a child, to muck around, to have fun, and to forget all the sort of, as she saw them, stuffy traditions that her husband was trying to give William.
The problem was that Charles and Diana's conflicting approaches became weapons in a relationship that was breaking down.
The best word to describe the parenting was a battle. And in the middle, being shelled, as it were, from both sides, were poor William and Harry. So Diana would deliberately allow William and Harry. She would take them to McDonald's, she would take them to Thorpe Park, she would let them muck around and have food fights, knowing that Charles would really dislike this because it was, as it were, corrupting the future king. He hated it. So when the children were with him, he dressed them in like something from the 18th century. They would wear moleskin breeks, thick worsted stockings and brogues, and they would go pheasant shooting. And he was doing that to show Diana that actually this is the way you should parent royal princes. And then they'd go back to Diana and she'd do the opposite. She'd say, don't worry about your knife and fork, you can eat all those chicken niblets with your fingers. You know, you can have food fights. You don't have to be stuffy royal princes. And so it was this constant battle.
With William and Catherine, it couldn't be more different.
The most wonderful thing that William and Catherine have been able to bring to their children is a happy marriage, a loving home.
And in their parenting, Charles's respect for formal tradition and Diana's love of having fun, rather than being a source of conflict, have been cleverly combined.
When you see William and Kate with their children in public, I think they've managed very cleverly to look fairly traditional. They wear the right kind of clothes. They don't do anything sudden or outlandish. But at the same time, they just look slightly warmer with each other, slightly more relaxed, because the children are allowed to be children. It's just a subtle shift, but a very important one.
William, more than any other royal in history, has prioritised time with his children and got involved in the detail of bringing up the new generation of royals. But such a radical change would create a growing problem in certain quarters.
The press didn't like William prioritising the family. He's being lazy. What on earth does he think he is?
Were Kate and Wills about to face a huge backlash from the British press? It was a quiet Saturday in 2021 near Catherine and William's Norfolk home on the Sandringham estate, when a shocking royal moment, hastily caught on a phone, hit the internet.
There was footage of William approaching a photographer and really getting very irate at this guy who tried to photograph the family when they were out cycling. And William was really angry. He was clearly upset and saying about it ruined the family day out, and he called for help from his security backup to sort of sort it out. And I think he was not worried about himself particularly, but about the effect on the children, because he said, you're here to try and take photographs of the children.
It epitomised a battle William has been fighting his whole life. The constant war against press intrusion. Even from his earliest years, he's faced intense media scrutiny.
If you're a young kid, it must be very difficult to face a bank of photographers all wanting you to look down their lens at their cameras. William actually, although he was quite boisterous then, did become quite shy of the cameras and used to try to sort of hide his face a little bit or just bow his head down a little bit as he got older, because he used to say he didn't like photographers, and he couldn't say photographers. He didn't like photographers, and he used to say that as a young kid.
Throughout his life, the prince has been trying to escape the spotlight and live a normal life. But of all the challenges he and Catherine have faced as parents in trying to change the way royal children are brought up, perhaps this is the one over which they have the least control.
William and Catherine want to be public servants, but they believe that their children have the right to privacy until they're adults.
They kind of know that they've got to feed this interest in the royal family. but they've got to make sure it doesn't escalate and doesn't become the type of photography that he grew up in. He is determined that it mustn't get out of hand in the way that it did with Diana.
For this royal prince, trying to control the press wasn't just a battle for privacy, but part of his duty as a parent to ensure the safety and happiness of his children. And it was on an ordinary January morning in 2016 that the world had one of its first glimpses into just how these modern royal parents intended to fight for their children's right to grow up in private.
I remember the photographs when George started at nursery. They were great. They were so intimate that you saw little George with his satchel and that ready for school on day one. He looked actually relaxed and happy. And rather than the press taking photographs, Kate took the photographs.
Through these simple family photos, the couple was sending out a powerful global message. When it came to their son and his image, it was now they as parents who were in control.
William and Catherine realised you've got to be able to control images of yourself, and particularly that the family should not be served up to the hungry maw of the modern media.
It was a huge change in royal norms. Ever since heirs to the throne started going to school, from Prince Charles's first day at Cheam in Surrey.
The sports car drives up to the door, for it contains a new boy who is making history. Prince Charles, heir to the throne.
To William's arrival at Eton, first day photo calls had become tradition.
I was there for the arrival of William at Eton College. It was September of 1995, and he was 13.
As he came out to walk with his parents and his housemaster, there was a bank, about 30 photographers and reporters and key TV crews all in one line where they were walking. And of course the photographers tend to shout out, I look this way, William, because they want to get him to look at their camera.
And the agreement was that the press were allowed to photograph his arrival at the college and then leave him alone. And that had happened right through their childhood with William and Harry, that the first day at school you could photograph, sometimes the last day.
With the photo of George at his first day at nursery, taken by Catherine herself, this pioneering prince and princess had pushed the press out of major royal milestones in their children's lives and rebelled against a century of royal tradition.
The great innovation that William and Catherine have introduced is there won't be an arranged photo call with banks of photographers and paparazzi. There will be a photograph taken by a family member that will be released.
What William and Catherine decided to do was they accepted that there needed to be photographs taken of their young son, but they very much wanted to be in control of that. As some photographers might say, they're not as good, but there's no doubt that having your mum take those pictures, they're going to be more natural. The child's going to be less stressed.
At the same time William was ensuring his children were protected from the press, he was also spending more time at home with his family. After centuries of future monarchs dedicating their whole lives to public service, it was a choice that began to cause controversy.
There were a lot of headlines, work shy William and things like that. I think that people were saying, yes, it's all right for William being a hands-on dad, but he wasn't putting enough effort in for engagement. You got to remember, he wasn't doing that, man.
It was a moment where it looked as though William's choice to put family over duty was so unpopular, it might even jeopardise the future of the crown.
The press didn't like William prioritising the family. He's being lazy. What on earth does he think he is? We pay our taxes. Why aren't you giving us our value for money? And it's not because he was turning his back on the royal family. It was just that he was trying to balance work and family. And I think it's hard for a lot of us, but it's even harder for the royals to do that.
At that stage, around about 2016, he would have known he's got quite a long stint as king one day, completely owned by the state, if you like. So I think he was putting his foot down. He didn't really particularly want to be dictated to by the media or anybody, actually, and would do what he wanted to do. I think that's what he was trying to say.
William may have antagonised the press, but in terms of his children, he couldn't have made a wiser choice. And the private photos he and Catherine continued to release were testament to the fact that his strategy as a parent had worked.
I think with the photographs that Kate's taken is that you see an incredibly happy family. There was the photograph that they took where they're in the sand dunes and William and the children are jumping up in the sand and she must be crouched right down to get this angle. And they were critically acclaimed. Traditionally, when you look back at the, Prince Philip and the Queen from the 40s and 50s, they were terribly regimented, terribly formal, quite forced, I think, to a certain extent. Now, they're very relaxed. You can see that they're a very warm, very happy family.
It was a new and intimate side of a very public family that showed privacy could be the recipe for royal happiness, not just for Charlotte, George and Louis, but for the once very camera-shy prince.
When it was Prince William's birthday a couple of years ago, and Catherine took the picture, and all three of the children were on top of him, making him laugh. And he was just lying there, laughing with them. And I thought he'd never have done that a few years ago. He would never let anybody see him be so relaxed and normal.
William and Catherine weren't rejecting their royal duty. They were still giving the public access to their family, but they had found a way of controlling the impact it had on every minute of their children's lives. And when the children did appear in public, William and Kate were there very carefully, guiding their every move. From toasting marshmallows with the scouts to appearing on that balcony.
When you're training royal children, the people that know the job best is the family. King Charles once said he learnt about the monarchy like a monkey learns, by watching its parents. George and Charlotte and Louis will learn about life by watching how William and Kate do. You see it at certain occasions like Christmas, when the royal family walk from Sandringham House to the tiny church at Sandringham, and then afterwards they do a walkabout and are given cards sometimes and presents. And you see William guiding George or Catherine guiding Charlotte and Louis and showing them, this is how you do it, this is how you talk to the public, and there's all kinds of things, whether to do selfies, not to be silly, but it's also sensitive things so you don't stick your foot in it, things like that. Very, very significant, because Prince William, Kate and the King and Camilla are the prime exponents, if you like, of soft power. They're representing Britain abroad, and the children learn firsthand what to do. And William and Catherine actually do it very well.
But no matter how carefully Catherine and William construct a world where their children are protected, they can't shield them from all the future pressures a royal role will bring. What they can do instead is aim to equip them emotionally for the attention and the inevitable scrutiny they will have to face. And where better to start than by challenging one of the most long-held royal traditions of all, the stiff upper lip.
The whole attitude of really the British upper classes was stiff upper lip. That had been the spirit that had won the empire, beaten the Kaiser, destroyed the Nazis.
In fact, going back generations, royal duty wasn't just about putting king and country above family life. It was also about maintaining composure in public at all times, no matter what the personal cost.
Whether you were, a princess or a prince, you must never show emotion. It was seen as weak. And going back 1,000 years, you could not have a weak king. It just wasn't allowed. So this was deeply embedded in the royal family.
But on an official visit William and Catherine made to a child bereavement centre in London, William gave an insight into a very different way of dealing with royal emotions.
There was a young girl there who'd lost her father. And he was speaking to her and said, well, I lost my mother too.
This was a time when he hadn't spoken much about his mother's death publicly. And just for him to sort of be willing to kind of open up a little bit in order to connect with a child that he really wanted to help and really wanted to support, I think says a lot about him and about how important this is to him.
It's nice you can chat together.
Share it. This is what William said to the girl who'd lost their parent. don't hold it all inside you, because that won't help you.
7 months earlier, William had made it clear that the open communication he so publicly supported was one that he also practiced as a parent at home.
In 2016, William released an open letter on Father's Day, reflecting on his own experiences as a father and what his priorities were as a father. And he said that looking after his children's mental health was just as important to him as looking after their physical health. And for a public figure, a royal, to be so open in this way about their own priorities when it comes to mental and emotional well-being, really does feel very powerful. And I think as a man as well, in an arena where historically, men have had this sense that they haven't felt able to be emotionally vulnerable, there's been a huge shift.
Through his letter, William had publicly rebelled against centuries of protocol, dictating royal children's stoic behaviour for the sake of duty. It was a radical decision with its roots in William's own traumatic past.
Harry said, I hated it because it's not their mummy, it was my mummy. How dare they cry?
So how would this prince ensure his own children's emotional well-being in the face of the traditions of the royal past? August 1997, and a 15-year-old Prince William was about to face the greatest test of suppressing his feelings for public duty.
A Buckingham Palace spokesperson has just announced that the Queen has been informed of Princess Diana's death. The Queen and the Prince...
I'm also reading here that the young Princes William and Harry were informed of their mother's death by the Prince of Wales.
The irony of Diana's death was that after a lifetime of putting duty above family, it was the one time in the Queen's reign where she clearly tried to put family first.
What's interesting is obviously we talk about the Queen's duty to the crown and putting the crown before everything. But when Diana was killed, what was the Queen's kind of focus? What wasn't duty, it wasn't crown, it was William and Harry. Because as we now know, she was doing everything to protect them, keep them up in Scotland. So when she said she dedicated her life to the service of her people, she did, apart from that one moment when everything changed and she literally turned her whole focus away from monarchy and shifted it straight to her grandkids, also for her own child, for her own son. It literally almost cost her the monarchy. But yet, for the love of her grandkids, she almost gave all of it up. So I think it shows you that even the Queen, in the winter of her years, suddenly realised that the children of the royal family are really important. And the reason they're important is without them, what future does the monarchy even have?
But the weight of intense public pressure demanding a royal appearance meant the Queen was forced to return to London with William and Harry to be with her people. And the young princes were thrust into the spotlight in a way they would never forgive or forget.
Where I was, you could look out and see where they joined the procession, and they walked through from St James's Palace, and you had this terrible thing looking back where the 5 men were lined up in front of us, and then they stood there for these few agonising moments in front of the press, waiting for their mother's body to appear, if you like, the coffin to appear. What struck me is, having been to several royal funerals, including the late Queen's, is that there's normally quietness, but with Diana it was not quiet, it was noise, because it was as if she was alive, and it was horrible because they were shouting, you know, Diana, we love you and we miss you, and the grief was palpable, and well, it was shocking. They wanted to share their deep emotion with the world, I suppose, but it was a very vocal and very visible grief, and the boys would have heard these screams from the crowd. You know, the irony, of course, was that they had to keep their traditional royal stiff upper lip and as if it was some formal royal engagement they were attending rather than their mother's funeral.
I mean, they both looked as if this is unbearable, but we have to do this. to respect our mother and because we are in the royal family. What Harry hated was that people were crying along the side, and he said, I hated it because it's not their mummy. It was my mummy. How dare they cry?
The death of Diana marked a watershed in how the royal family dealt with emotion in royal childhood. Not just on the day of the funeral itself, but as a result of the ripples that emanated from it.
The Diana funeral was definitely a turning point in the stiff upper lip. You know, if the population had continued to be as angry as they were with what was seen as the senior royals' coldness towards Diana, they really could have been in trouble.
At the time, you took it for granted because that's, again, what royalty did from generation to generation. William himself has said that the stiff upper lip generation had a lot to answer for in terms of the effect it had on them as people, because it sort of messes up your life. So I think he's determined that his children would be more emotionally sort of balanced, willing to express emotion.
With Charlotte, Louis and George, Catherine and William are passionate about encouraging them to freely express how they feel, even when it's a decision about doing your royal duty to the king.
When Prince George was asked to be a page at the coronation, Catherine talked to him and said, would you like to do this, George? And he made the decision whether he wanted to be or not. And he agreed, but he didn't want to wear breeches and silk stockings. So they slightly altered the page's costumes because he said people at school would have laughed at him. And I mean, I think that was quite a revelation. Old-fashioned children never had any choice. They were told what to do, when to do it, what to wear. Certainly there wouldn't be any choice about what they wore.
I think that Catherine and William allow their children to be who they are. I think they want good manners, good behaviour, but I think that they can be themselves. And if you look at them at any event, they wave very nicely, just as they should. But if ever they put a foot wrong, Charlotte jumps in and won't stand for it. I think she's one of these extraordinary young children who keeps her eye on everything and knows what to do and is very responsible. And little Louis, who's a bit of a monkey, is absolutely gorgeous.
With Louis, you can see that he's not going to be the easiest child. And when he was, being naughty in front of the world, he endeared himself to us, but she looked slightly exasperated. I think he probably just wanted to go and sit on his granddad's knee and be the centre of attention. And he looked quite sort of smug when he got away with it.
It's through being able to express themselves openly that William and Kate believe they will create emotionally resilient royals, not by forcing their children to hide their feelings away. But Kate and William's parenting revolution was about to face the ultimate challenge. There could be no greater test of their success in creating emotionally resilient children than Kate's unexpected diagnosis.
They were very worried because young children obviously think of the word cancer, they think that you're going to die.
On the 22nd of March, 2024, the nation received shocking news about the Princess of Wales.
It's Friday evening, and Catherine, the Princess of Wales, has just released this very personal video message of her sitting on a bench in Windsor, explaining to the world what has happened to her health.
The Princess of Wales' diagnosis with cancer was horrendous. I mean, when we all found out, it was horrific enough. Imagine what they were going through in that family, having to tell those children. And William reliving his past, it's not something that you would wish on anybody.
She handled that message that she gave with such grace, such class. But there were moments when she looked down that, she was close to tears, it seemed to me. Very emotional, what she had to do, and very brave the way she did it.
This, of course, came as a huge shock. And William and I have been doing everything we can to process and manage this privately for the sake of our young family.
Obviously, Kate getting her cancer diagnosis one of the things that was at the front of their minds was, how do we tell our children about this?
In their public roles, Catherine and William were pioneers of encouraging open communication to build children's emotional resilience. Now suddenly, their work took on a very personal significance.
I think it was important that they'd worked so much on mental health and children's mental health and the right way to do things. But equally, when it's you're talking about and it's your family, you don't know how you're going to react.
It had taken me time to recover from major surgery in order to start my treatment. But most importantly, it has taken us time to explain everything to George, Charlotte and Louis in a way that's appropriate for them and to reassure them that I'm going to be okay.
She made it clear that the most important thing for her had been to take the time to explain everything to George and Charlotte and Louis. And this had clearly been such a huge part of their thinking around protecting the children, around making sure that they told them in the right way.
And the timing of Kate's message showed how making sure their children were supported was at the heart of all this royal couple's decisions. In the weeks leading up to Catherine's announcement, her absence had fueled a media frenzy.
There was this quite prolonged period where there was this very intense speculation, and a lot of it quite hysterical, because nobody knew what was going on. You know, where is Kate? What's wrong? Why is she not being seen? And it was kind of blowing up into this huge phenomenon. And I think it came to a head when they released a Mother's Day photograph that had been digitally altered.
It now became clear that there'd been a very good reason Catherine had disappeared from public view, and that she and William had refused to give in to global pressure.
For Catherine and William, it was very important that when the news was released about her cancer, that should disturb the children as little as possible. So it was very significant that when that announcement was made, that the children by then had departed from school and were on their way to a secluded holiday at Anmer Hall. So she absolutely didn't want that news to emerge and for the children to have to go to school and have it discussed. So at least they're able to digest the announcement on holiday.
And even though there was all of this hysteria and all of this pressure, they still stuck to their guns about what was the right thing for them and for their family when it came to the timing of that announcement.
But however long they delayed, and however committed they were about being open with their children, they still had to break to them the devastating news.
They were very worried about how they were going to tell the children, because young children obviously think of the word cancer, they think that you're going to die.
Really, I've never had the experience to know how difficult it would be, but I should imagine it's one of the most difficult things you have to do, to sit a child down and say, look, you know, I have had a medical diagnosis, it is this, it can lead to this, but it doesn't have to.
There may have been a clue to how they approached it 2 years earlier, when Kate appeared on CBeebies.
I've chosen a story which I remember reading as a little girl.
She chose to read about an owl who was frightened in the dark.
We can all feel scared sometimes, just like our little owl friend Plop. But, as Mrs. Barnow said, it's better to find out about the things that scare us before we make up our mind. And with the help of others, we can often face things that worry us.
The poor little owl was so scared he didn't know what to do. But if little children can actually say something to others about how scared they are, whether it's the dark, wherever it is, they can get someone who can help them or someone who can hug them. And so you can get through it. I'm sure that's how they managed their own children, that they would want them to tell them what was wrong.
It goes back to Catherine's whole theme of the first 5 years. And it's so important to her that everything she does, if necessary, will be explained to the children so they understand and they're not frightened and they know what's happening.
In the wake of the princess's announcement, Prince William stepped away from his royal duties to be with his family. And unlike the moment his mother died, this time the public accepted his decision to retreat.
I think everything shifted when she made that announcement because people were so shocked. There was just this real moment, I think, of empathy more than anything else for them.
Perhaps the overwhelming support was testament to the success of their royal revolution. The way they'd consistently prioritised family and what's best for their children had also shifted what the public had come to expect. It's a shift that after a lifetime of prioritising country and Commonwealth himself, even the King is said to endorse.
Charles said to William, please don't make the mistake that I made, and I want you to enjoy your family life. And Charles was very insistent about this, because he said, I was so dedicated to duty, I couldn't make way for family life in the way that I should have done. And that's what William did.
I absolutely can see that there's been a turning point in his life because of what I witnessed. I think that for the first time ever, you've got a king who I think deep down, if his boys needed him, he would probably put them before the crown. That's what I believe. And that's the first time that would have ever happened in the history of the monarchy.
As Catherine and William face their royal future, they have achieved what might once have seemed impossible, a new way of fulfilling their duty, where tradition and modernity are combined, and the emotional well-being of their children is as important as loyalty to the crown.
I think for William and Kate, but especially William, part of his duty is to ensure that the monarchy continues. And if George is to be a good, modern king in touch with the way his people view the world, he needs good parenting. And William and Kate are really aware of that.
And the film Catherine released at the end of her treatment showed very clearly that this tough period of their lives had only confirmed their decision to put family first.
Life as you know it can change in an instant, and we've had to find a way to navigate the stormy waters and road unknown.
Anyone had been in any doubt about that was the focus of their life, that was their philosophy that they wanted to live by, then here it was presented to you. And it was incredibly groundbreaking in how intimate it was.
And with that, a new perspective on everything.
Is this filming?
In that footage, they're out in the countryside and they're having fun. And I get the sense that that is what she sees her duty to be as a mum first. She'll never neglect her duties as a princess, but being a mum comes first.
By putting family first, this revolutionary royal couple have done nothing less than redefine the very nature of what it means to be royal. And through their embrace of the ordinary, William and Kate have done the remarkable, secured the future of the crown.
It's great that William and Catherine are trying so hard to be model parents. I'm sure that Charles and Diana tried that. I'm sure that that was what Elizabeth and Philip thought in their time. I think they've all tried their best. And I think William and Catherine are succeeding.